It's a bit surprising looking back at the MCU as a whole and how much there is to it, with over 20 films and now TV shows being thrown into the mix, which unfortunately led me to having a bit of a Marvel fatigue at this moment. So when What If was announced and released, I had little to no interest in it, and I wasn't really wanting to watch it for a little bit, but felt obligated because if I have to watch another Marvel movie to understand the story, I might need to check this out, and plus, the reviewer in me was trying to convince myself to just watch it, even though I was being lazy as hell. And sadly, this is kind of what I've done with a lot of the Marvel shows being released, where I pretty much just watch them when they're around the halfway point of a huge plot twist or reveal being shown, and I don't get spoiled by it, luckily. But even though it was able to work for at least WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier, and a little bit of Loki, it didn't for this show, and I didn't watch it until all the episodes were released. And sadly, I couldn't avoid most spoilers for it, so I basically knew what was gonna happen going into the show for a majority of it. Which, on one hand, wasn't a big deal, since it's more the writing, animation, and other aspects that are more important to consider. But on the other hand, moments lost their weight to them when watching it. But enough of that. How was Marvel's What If? Well, pretty good for the most part. To get it out of the way, this show isn't bad, and I was pleasantly surprised by it at times. However, the show does have quite a few catches to it that can take away from the overall experience. First off, I enjoy the art style, having a mixture of kind of 2D and 3D elements to it that make it seem pretty unique and kind of like it's from a comic book. And it's super cool. Like, I love the scene where Doctor Strange is taking the power from all these individual creatures, and they mix it with 2D animation from a lot of the creatures, and it looks beautiful. And a lot of the sets are also just 2D paintings as well, again, like in the Doctor Strange episode. But it all looks stunning. Though I did notice there were a few animation hiccups throughout the show, most notably how sometimes characters' mouths don't seem to match up with the animation.
No, seriously, we only take cash.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have cash.
Wait, you are the Star-Lord. You saved my home world from a Kree invasion.
But at the very least, I can appreciate a new animation style that isn't just generic 3D models, even if it does have a couple issues in it. So good on them for doing something new and unique. Next, the voice acting was pretty spotty at times. Now, with certain voice actors, they do a pretty good job with the material given, and for those filling in for the real Marvel actors, did fantastic jobs. Like the VAs for Captain Marvel and Black Widow did great, where I could barely tell the difference between them and their live-action counterparts. Though there were a couple who are a little off, like the VA for Tony, who doesn't do a bad job at all, but I would have preferred someone else, like Eric Loomis, who's done Iron Man and Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Huh?
Hey, just waiting for my ride.
Some of the Marvel actors who do appear in this show do surprisingly great jobs, like Benedict Cumberbatch and the late Chadwick Boseman, who does a great job for his final performance, and I was glad to see him in a lot more episodes than I was expecting. Though there were a lot of VAs that were not as good as other ones. Like, even though they were able to get the actual actors to voice their characters, they don't have the skills regular voice actors have, since there needs to be more vocal expression than regular acting, and it can come off a little odd at points. Even though some of the good VAs have a couple of odd line deliveries as well.
Nothing is impossible. You taught me that. I only require more power.
Even for some of the regular actors like Samuel L. Jackson and Jeremy Renner do fine jobs in this. They're basically just doing themselves and not really doing anything special. But I don't know if that was really needed for this show. It was just something I kind of saw. But besides that, the voice acting is serviceable and no one does a truly bad job. Everything is fine in it. The stories here, though, were probably the most interesting part, with them taking an anthology approach to the show, and the multiverse setting was perfect for it, and it was taken advantage of for the most part. But I'll get into that in the finale later. So now, I thought that many of the episodes were interesting, with many of the different scenarios being great, such as the serial killer mystery in episode 3, and Ultron's victory in episode 8. Though I personally didn't think all the episodes were amazing, with a couple being pretty weak, with episode 7, Party Thor, being the weakest in terms of not being very interesting and overall goofy. Although I did enjoy the Captain Carter and Killmonger episodes, they were basically the same story in a way to their regular movies, where Captain Carter still played out what happened in the first Avenger, just differently. I mean, she ends up almost exactly where the Winter Soldier starts off. Additionally, Killmonger, It was interesting to see him gain more influence and pull the strings on both sides in the story. It was fascinating, but it didn't show him ruling Wakanda or taking over the world like his original plans were in Black Panther. So that was pretty disappointing not even getting to see that. And the finale basically set in stone that that story will not be continued. So yeah, that's nice. But my biggest issue with the show is the writing, comedy, and pacing. Now, pacing itself for the episodes is fine for the most part, but it's mostly how long conversations last between characters, usually saying a sentence and then immediately being followed by the next piece of dialogue without a break in between lines.
An interdimensional force that will lead Hydra to world domination. And if that fails, world annihilation.
Talk about being a few sardines short of a can.
The Red Skull has taken cover here at Castle de Crake in the Black Forest.
No wonder Hydra targeted Rogers. You'd need the Stomper to get close.
Colonel, you're lucky to even be in the room.
Like, I might be the only one that has an issue with this, but I notice weird things, so you might not have the same view as I do. Comedy as well was very spotty, with most jokes in my opinion not landing. Not being bad per se, but just them being too many and just trying too hard. With them doing the Marvel formula of trying to make you laugh as much as possible. And the zombies episode was the biggest culprit of this, with unnecessary comedy, especially when it's probably one of the darkest episodes in terms of its story. I mean, at least the Doctor Strange episode understood that its serious tone didn't need jokes like this. Reality collapsing on itself? I've seen more original. But those were minimal issues, since the dialogue pacing wasn't really noticeable, and the comedy issue is something that keeps occurring in Marvel media and probably won't change. The bigger issue for me was the writing, and not necessarily the dialogue, but of the things that transpire. An example of this is the first episode, when Captain Carter has to go after the Tesseract before it reaches Berlin. Nazi-occupied Berlin. She immediately shows up there waiting for them, and during the entire fight when she's basically killing everyone, explosions going around and all, at no point did reinforcements show up in Nazi-occupied Berlin. And they just cut to her getting the Tesseract to New York with nothing else. She even gets Armin Zola over there too! And I understand that the episodes are limited to almost 30 minutes, but I've seen other shows give time to explaining things like that in shorter time spans. But this was more of an issue when it came to the last two episodes involving Ultron. Now, episode 8, the first one involving him, was great and probably my second favorite episode, since it allowed us to actually see what would happen if one of the Marvel villains actually won. If they did that with Killmonger, but they did not. And I've gotta say, it was satisfying to see Ultron destroy everything, and seeing what would happen if he won, taking off into the stars and destroying other worlds. It was great, and seeing how desperate Black Widow and Hawkeye were, was honestly depressing.
Clint, is this my color?
Come on. Don't try to make this fun, Nat. My will to live meter is flatlining, okay?
Lord, that is harsh. But when I see Ultron easily one-shot Thanos with one stone when Thanos has 5, is a little much, especially when we've seen him take on multiple heroes at once. And there are a couple more examples of this I can list, but I'd rather use that time to talk about the last and somewhat most controversial part of the show, being its season finale, where the series comes together with all the heroes we followed along together to defeat Ultron. And Gamora's there. And I think it was a mistake. Now, don't get me wrong, the finale was interesting and it had some pretty awesome moments in it, with a clever way of finishing off the final battle. But overall, I think it was unnecessary to bring everyone together, since it just kinda devalued the other episodes. Like, I don't think Strange Supreme needed a redemption arc, since it lessened a very sad ending he had in episode 4. Also, when fighting Ultron, it seemed as though it was only Strange who was pulling the weight out of the whole team. Like, he's the guy who has to give everyone a protection spell, concentrate on them, and could take on Ultron's galaxy-destroying attacks. Simply put, if you take any of the other characters out of the team besides Killmonger, maybe, you'd probably have the same outcome. But if you took Strange Supreme out, then it'd be game over before it even started. Wait a minute, at that point, why didn't the Watchers just grab like hundreds of heroes from around the multiverse instead of just 6 people? Like, why? And there's another reason why the finale shouldn't have been a crossover. But overall, I'd say that Marvel's What If is an interesting idea that still has way more potential that has yet to be seen. This season was pretty good with all the stories being good, and I know I trashed a couple of them, but I can't in good conscience call them bad. I mean, even Party Thor, with it being the weakest one, was still pretty entertaining and kind of funny at times. So with that, What If gets a 7 out of 10. It's a fun show, with moments in there sprinkled around offering entertaining ideas and spins on Marvel stories. Oh, and also, before I go, here's my rankings for the episodes. Might be a little different from yours, or it could go with the consensus, but it's just what I think. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. See ya!